A Million Years in a Day by Greg Jenner. There are many daily habits that were developed by the ancient humans since ancient times, and human beings still practice them on a daily and continuous basis until today. The first thing you look at every morning is the alarm clock that rings to wake you from your deep sleep and then reluctantly leave your bed to start a new day in your life. Today, most people use their smartphones to set the alarm clock. But the idea of the alarm dates back to the ancient world, as stories of the Greek history indicate that the famous philosopher Plato invented an alarm clock that relies on a primitive mechanism that uses water pressure and air movement to produce a loud whistling sound when it's time to wake up. In fact, the time and date notation was one of the oldest habits that man adopted as a basic thing in his daily life. Historical evidence indicates that the oldest calendar in the world is about 30,000 years old. It was found in a cave in France, and it was made of eagle bones that scratched on its surface a series of cracks that represented the phases of the moon. The ancient Egyptians also relied on sundials that used the shadow of a stick to determine the time approximately. Bit to remember: since ancient times, humans have used various tools and methods to calculate time and date. Breakfast is usually the first thing in your day, and for many people, it's the most important meal of the day. If we look at the basic ingredients of our breakfast meals today, we find that they have a long history, and that many of them have undergone interesting historical developments. If we look at breakfast cereals, or the so-called corn flakes, the idea of breakfast cereal was born in 1894, when Will Kellogg, the founder of the famous Kellogg's Company, was boiling wheat in an attempt to invent an alternative food for bread. But instead of wheat becoming bread, the boiled mixture turned into a sticky mixture of wheat and water. Kellogg's experiment was unsuccessful, but he didn't want to waste the wheat he used. So he tried to filter it from the water by squeezing the mixture through large filters. After filtering, Will Kellogg discovered that the end result was the opposite of his expectations. The result was crispy flakes of wheat that could be preserved and eaten after a period of time. Therefore, his experiment paved the way for the invention of the corn flakes that we know today. Bread is one of the most popular breakfast ingredients of all time. It was a much older invention than corn flakes. Historical evidence indicates that between 10,000 and 2000 BC, humans began baking primitive forms of bread. Likewise, eggs, the second most popular ingredient in breakfast, the oldest evidences for its usage as food date back to around 1400 BC in Egypt. The ancient Egyptians ate eggs with bread, using a number of modern methods of cooking eggs which are familiar to us, such as fried and boiled eggs. Bit to remember: the history of the breakfast meal that we know today dates back to ancient times, since the beginning of man's discovery of agriculture and raising animals. Back in ancient times, the ancient Greeks and Romans were proud of their personal hygiene, which was reflected by the public baths that spread in the major cities at that time. Then, during the 17th century, ancient concepts of personal hygiene began to diminish, especially in Europe. Some French thinkers believed that baths were unnecessary for hygiene, and that wearing linen clothes was simply a cleaner and better alternative to bathing in water. The French also believed that showering clogs skin pores and prevents the skin from doing its job of preventing dirt from entering the body. Fortunately, the scholars of the 18th century came to refute everything that the scientists of the previous century believed, and bathing is again the ideal method of personal hygiene. Focusing on dental health and hygiene was and still a major personal hygiene habit. If you go to the market to buy a new toothpaste or a new toothbrush, you find several options that market the product's cleansing, whitening, and protection capabilities. In fact, dental care is not a modern idea as many people think. The modern Pakistani city Meraga was a home to the oldest group of dentists in history, dating back to more than 9,000 years. There are evidences of very small holes in the teeth of human fossils with measurements from 0.5 millimeters to 3.5 millimeters. These holes were most likely a kind of medical treatment carried out with some primitive tools. In a cemetery in Slovenia, a human jaw was found which was about 6,500 years old, and it contained what's believed to be the first dental filling made of beeswax. The Chinese invented what's believed to be the first toothbrush in history, in which their use spread in China during the 7th and 8th century. These ancient brushes were made of animal bristles and attached to handles of bone. Bit to remember, personal hygiene habits have gone through various developments and beliefs throughout human history, and dental care was among the first hygiene habits that humans adopted in the ancient times. Eating in groups has always been one of the most important social habits of human beings. In ancient times, members of the tribe gathered around the fire, which was the focus of energy that warms their bodies and helps them to cook food. During the Bronze Age, the Babylonians made dinner a very important part of society's rituals. So instead of signing contracts, partners in commerce would eat dinner together and share salt and drink as a symbol to document their new partnership. Refusing an invitation to a meal is considered an impolite behavior and may even arouse doubt and suspicion about the intentions of the other party. The ancient Greeks and Romans believed that a shared meal was the best way to communicate and establish close social bonds. This long cultural history can explain to us why people prefer to eat in groups than to eat alone until this day. This historical legacy may also explain what people currently do by eating meals while establishing trade agreements or celebrating a social event, or even on a daily basis to talk and spend time with family members and friends. Bit to remember, eating in groups was and still one of the most important social habits that strengthen the bond and cohesion between members of the society. Thanks for watching. Please follow our social media accounts. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel.